So it seems like he can say really stupid things and become successful. And just today, I ran into another example of this. So I'm changing gears a little bit. Let's look at somebody else. Let's look at, let me put him up here. See if anybody recognizes him. Yeah. Anyone recognize that bozo? This is Matt Powell, the young Christian preacher who recently linked up with Kent Hovind and has been pushing really stupid young earth creationism ideas all over the place. And oh man, he's terrible. Kent Hovind tends to put out these huge hour-long or 2-hour-long rambling videos in which he's talking with his audience, and it's pretty much not worth listening to. I will say this for Matt Powell, he comes out with these little short 5-minute videos that are still just as stupid, but I don't have to waste an hour trying to get through them. So yeah, there's good old Matt Powell, and he came up with this video just recently. It's titled "Atheist YouTubers Are Stuck in Fantasy Land." And the entire thing is Matt Powell just kept going off on all those atheist YouTubers who have video games in their background or action figures, like SpongeBob, or posters and all this kind of stuff. He just totally disrespects that. So let me just play a little. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but let's listen to a little bit of this guy.
Dragon Ball Z in the background, or Star Fox. I mean, to me, it's a dead giveaway. We're dealing with a crowd of people that are literally stuck in their childhood, and they've never grown out of it. But of course, this is the first crowd to tell us that the Bible's wrong. This is the first crowd to come to tell us that dinosaurs farted them.
Wait, before I go in here. So he thinks it's a mark of shame that some YouTubers actually like to play video games or read comic books or see Marvel movies. He's basically shaming people for their hobbies. He's also doing some selective analysis here because most of the YouTubers I follow don't get into that stuff. It's just that, one of the ways to get successful in acquiring viewers and growing your channel on YouTube is to get interested in pop culture, to talk about pop culture. So you'll find that you can find lots of YouTubers who are interested in pop culture and regularly put videos up about it. And they also go after creationists because they're goofy. Okay, so that's one thing that's going on here. All right, so he's complaining about all these shallow, immature YouTubers, unlike little mini-me Matt. And then he's going to tell us all these great arguments against evolution that make evolution look stupid.
Crowd to come to tell us that dinosaurs farted themselves to death.
Okay, that's one. He says these papers say that dinosaurs farted themselves to death.
Or that squids and octopi rode on a comet from outer space.
He's talked about this one a lot. Number two is that squids came from space. That scientists seriously believe this. How stupid!
Into our Earth and crash landed to evolve and to continue their evolution on Earth. Of course, the crowd that tells us that the Bible is incorrect and that Jesus was just a man and not God is the very crowd that believes that monkeys made a sea voyage from Africa to South America on rafts. That they literally surfed from Africa to South America. One guy responded to me.
Okay, this is the third one. He ridicules the idea that animals might have surfed across the ocean. to colonize new lands, new mainlands, new islands, all these sorts of things, which is kind of a standard thing in evolutionary theory. Well, in more than that, in observations of evolutionary history, that that happens. Yeah, how do you think the Galapagos got colonized by those iguanas and also by those finches? The ongoing observations suggest that, roughly 5 or 6 million years ago, South American mainland iguanas were blown across the Pacific Ocean, the 1,000 miles or so to the Galapagos Islands, on storm-blown bits of the forest. Trees fall down, you get a whole bunch of brush. It makes a natural kind of raft. These sorts of things have been observed. That in major storms, you'll often find things like, big floating rafts of debris, and you can find animals living on them. And the idea is that 5 or 6 million years ago, these animals drifted across the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean in this case. That's how New World monkeys populated the New World, is hitching a ride. It's really not a shocking idea. It's not at all surprising, but he thinks that's nuts. Okay, that's enough listening to him. Let's look at what people have actually said about this stuff. Okay, so let me switch out here. Oh, I gotta figure out how to do everything. Stop that share. Let's go to a different screen. All right, anyway, so what are we looking at here? So Matt Powell used this article to ridicule the idea, the first idea that, dinosaurs may have farted themselves to death. First of all, let's look at the quality of his source. That's a movie review channel. This isn't a bunch of scientists writing about this. This is an abuse of the idea, actually. So yeah, some scientists published some actual stories about this. Riley Black, I really respect Riley Black's work. He's a very good writer. Wrote a more serious article about this. He wrote, let's see, here we are. So this is an article on Smithsonian, and he points out something that Matt Powell never admit: the media blows hot air about dinosaur flatulence. Yeah. So what Riley is pointing out is that no, that's not true, what they're saying. In fact, he reads the original article and he points out this important thing. First of all, that the article does not claim that dinosaurs farted themselves to death. It does not anywhere discuss extinction. But here's what the article actually did. They paired estimates of sauropod population size derived from the fossil record, data. So we're looking at data here. And they're looking in a particular slice of time, 150 million years ago. And then they also made an estimate of how much methane each dinosaur would produce. And again, that's based on data. Looking at modern day mammals, you can estimate, if you have this diet, how much methane are you going to produce? And there's room for error in there, but it's an initial first estimate. And again, so far everything is based on data, isn't it? Let's look at the fossil record, see how many of these big apatosaurs were walking around. Let's look at modern animals and ask how much methane do they produce, and then we can estimate the population size of these dinosaurs and figure out how much methane they would have produced per year. And they would have produced about 520 million metric tons of methane. And okay, boy, that's a lot of gas coming out of these, but it's kind of what you'd expect. And then they compare that to what we're pumping out, what humanity is pumping out, and it's about the same. So this is close to what human beings are doing. So does that lead to our extinction? At least not yet. But what they're saying is this might have created and sustained the relatively warm world of the dinosaurs. Yeah, so it's answering another question. Why were things in the Jurassic a little warmer, significantly warmer than they are now? And one reason might be the biological production of these gases. Hey, that seems like a fabulous idea. Yeah, that's reasonable. It's nothing crazy here, even if Matt Powell would like you to think it is. Okay, what else did Matt Powell say? He also ridiculed the idea of squids from space. And I got to tell you, he's right. It's a ridiculous idea. I ridiculed it too. So here I have, this is an article I wrote. So squids from space. Yeah, I read this article and it was absurd. And look at that roster of names here. I recognize so many of these names. These are all professional kooks. Okay, this is fringiest of the fringe science. Yeah, there's Ted Steele. He was the guy who argued for Lamarckian evolution. Let's see who else we got here. Oh, Brig Kleiss. He's always been there for panspermia. I remember him from the old Usenet days. Let's see who else we got here. A lot I don't know. Milton Wainwright, some British guy who's been in a lot of their stuff. Jamie Wallace, a member of Parliament, also a kook. Then we also have, of course, Wickramasinghe. This guy was a former student of Hoyle's, and he's been riding this hobby horse for decades now. It's everything came from outer space, according to Wickramasinghe. That he's been just publishing this drivel all over the place. Usually, I see him in things like the Journal of Cosmology, which is also a very fringe source. This is the one that's run by Ron Joseph, who's utterly bat. I won't say it because we don't want to get demonetized. He's a crazy guy, in a pejorative sense. He doesn't like me at all. Yeah, we've clashed a number of times. But anyway, what this story was he claims that octopus, cephalopods in general, are genetically and biologically distinct from other organisms on planet Earth. And no, that's not true. Yeah, the cephalopods have a number of unusual characteristics in their genome, but it's nothing so radical that it's not derived from terrestrial ancestors. We can see the affinities between cephalopod genes and other molluscan genes. We've got a good picture of how they evolved. So, like I mentioned here, cephalopods do a lot of gene editing. That is, they synthesize RNA, and then there's enzymes that go in and tweak the RNA. So that happens a fair amount in cephalopods, but other organisms do this as well. It's nothing spectacular. So, what we've got here, this is the bottom line. This paper presents no evidence. And if you read the paper, what you'll discover, the only person it cites is Chandra Wickramasinghe and his cronies. It's terrible. It's like, oh, they're just, here goes my monetization. They're just jerking each other off. And it's just a gigantic circle jerk of this small coterie of weird fringe panspermists. It has nothing at all to do with real science. So yeah, when our good buddy Matt Powell says this is stupid and foolish, he is actually agreeing with the consensus view of the majority of scientists in the world that he's ridiculous. So you can't accuse evolution of going bad with that. Okay, what else did he? Oh, he also talked about the rafting business, right? This is another one, and this one is perfectly reasonable. So here's another. This is a CNN news story, but we'll get to some other stuff in a moment. So this is a crew of now extinct monkeys made a treacherous transatlantic journey on a natural raft from Africa to settle in South America around 35 million years ago. And that's determined by the presence of uniquely primate teeth. Now, this, again, is using scientific evidence to reach a conclusion that we know that there were primates on the African mainland that sometime around 35 million years ago ended up on the South American mainland. How did they get there? Do you think they just jumped? No. So the most likely explanation is this whole idea of floating islands of vegetation, that tropical storms can get pretty ferocious and dump these things in the sea, and then they drifted across. These kinds of floating islands have been observed. Again, it's empirical data-based evidence here. They've been observed and sometimes even have trees on them, uprooted trees that are floating along there, which would provide fruit for a little while for a voyage across the ocean. I imagine the poor little monkeys were dehydrated and exhausted and hungry and jumped off at the first chance they could when they saw South America. And then they found a whole new lineage of primates on that continent. This is not at all surprising. Matt Powell thinks it is. But I have news for Matt Powell, because guess who else endorses this idea? Yeah, this is Answers in Genesis. Answers in Genesis thinks this is a really good idea. They like this idea, not to explain, the actual facts of the distribution of species on planet Earth as they happened, but because they have this biblical problem that they believe in this thing called the flood that killed everything, and then this giant boat grounded on a mountain in Turkey with all the animals on there, and the animals all had to get to their final destination to spread out and repopulate the world. And somehow the kangaroos got across to Australia, and the New World monkeys had to have gotten across to South America. All these animals had, yeah, it's Noah, right? How can you argue with Noah that somehow these had to get across these vast bodies of water? And the explanation that they offer, and according to Steve Austin, who's kind of an idiot anyway, in his PhD dissertation, he said, okay, there was a floating mat model. There was all these logs and things that were uprooted in the flood, and they're just kind of piling up in there and getting compressed and making things like coal and oil. All right. But it's also a way that, this is how, okay, so look there. John Morris likes this idea. He posited that insects could have survived the flood on floating vegetation. So, and there's Kurt Wise, all these people from the creationist literature who are going to be kind of embarrassed that Matt Powell thinks their idea is ridiculous. I mean, how else does Matt Powell explain the dispersion of animals after the flood was over? So yeah, these ideas have been around. And it's not just Answers in Genesis. Here's another one. This is Creation Ministries International. They make the same argument. Natural rafts carried animals around the globe. Again, after the Great Flood, which didn't happen. So why is he objecting to this? Okay, it's because he's not very bright. He's Yeah. Let me take a look here and see what people are saying in the chat. Okay. Yeah. So here, yeah, this is a good question. How does something from another planet have the same kind of genetic setup as Earth species, coincidentally? They wouldn't. There's so much natural variation, and we can trace the lineage of these species back and back and back. We can see who's related to who, and I know that Kent and Matt hate this, but yeah, when you look at the genetic sequence of all these organisms, we're all related. Yeah, we really are related to mosquitoes very distantly. There's about 600, 700 million years of divergence from the last common ancestor of mosquitoes and humans. But yeah, we can see, this was the big deal in Evo Devo in the 1980s, is we had finally got all these tools to sequence things, and we had identified all these developmental genes. And we go looking and we find, for instance, Hox genes in insects and Hox genes in mice and in people and all these things. Yeah, everything's linked here.